From John Williams to Thomas Newman, Alan Silvestri to Nicholas Britell, or Danny Elfman to newer names such as Hereditary's Colin Stetson, the arenas of cinema and television have produced endless scores that continue to fascinate, inspire, scare, or conjure feelings of curiosity, amazement, and grandeur. Out of all the composers working today, one continues to fascinate me perhaps more than any other. He's a composer that tends to keep his radar down, avoid interviews, and simply write and perform. He's a person that is tremendously shy, but whose music is some of the most telling, expressive, and revealing. His name is Jonny Greenwood. With the release of 2 new Jonny Greenwood scores this year, including Power of the Dog and Spencer, my favorite score of the year thus far, I thought it would be a good opportunity to talk about Greenwood's towering stamp on cinema in recent years, and a few of the elements of what makes him a brilliant and enigmatic composer. Greenwood was born in Oxford, England in 1971, growing up with his brother and fellow Radiohead member Colin. From an early age, Greenwood's exposure to music was vast. From Mozart concertos to classic musicals, folk music, the Greenwood family made it a goal to load up both the newest and the oldest tunes in their car cassette player. Soon enough, Greenwood began hearing music everywhere in the world around him, even in the noise of his car engine. He'd even be able to recall the details of music he had just heard almost to a T. Greenwood began playing music around the age of 4 or 5 after he started to play a recorder that was given to him. He took the instrument seriously and would go on to play it into adulthood. The next chapter of his life would see him participate in a youth orchestra, where he played the viola. Though he spent lots of time learning the ins and outs of music theory, studying Baroque music, and even playing in recorder groups as a teenager, he also began programming computers, experimenting with electronics, and forming the foundations that would eventually lead to his extremely unique sound. But I'm a creep. I'm a what the hell am I doing here? Greenwood's career with Radiohead would see more than 30 million albums sold worldwide, an induction in the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame, and endless avenues for musical experimentation. Whether it's quarter tone techniques influenced by Polish composer Krzysztof Penderecki, heavy use of drum machines, modular synthesis, or orchestral elements, Greenwood's approach as a musician was similar to a mad inventor, seeing what happens when 2 seemingly bizarre sounds come together. Greenwood once said, "I'm always happiest trying new instruments, and honestly enjoy playing, say the glockenspiel with Radiohead as much as I do the guitar. I think regular touring has forced me to play the guitar more than anything else, which is why I'm probably most confident playing that. And whilst I'd be lost if I couldn't play it too, I dislike the totemic worship of the thing, magazines, collectors, and so on. I enjoy struggling with instruments I can't really play." Basically, I could create a whole video exclusively about Greenwood's work with Radiohead and barely scratch the surface of how much I love it. But things began to get really interesting in 2003, when Greenwood began a new solo venture. Since the beginning of his solo career as a film composer, Greenwood has participated in films that gave him interesting opportunities to bring his individual knack for dark undertones, experimentation, and a sound that could only be described as Jonny Greenwood. An auteur in the best of ways, but one who isn't afraid to craft unusual musical worlds individual to each film and each character. Every one of Greenwood's scores basically turns the idea of conventional on its head. Rather than the pristine and slick beauty of organized musical patterns, simple to recognize themes, and on-the-nose scoring, Greenwood wants to bring you into a world that is mysterious, sometimes hostile, dangerous, but ultimately a world that asks far more questions than it does answer them. The first in his collaborations with director Paul Thomas Anderson, There Will Be Blood, is a film that follows an antagonist, and a seriously interesting one at that.
You have none of me in you. Just bastard from a basket. If I travel all the way up there and I find that you've been lying to me, I'm gonna find you and I'm gonna take more than my money back. Is that all right with you?
It's a film that follows a man's journey into hell and violence. Greenwood's score doesn't simply tell us who we should like, who we shouldn't like, and what's happening on screen. Instead, Greenwood's music is the blisteringly haunting world of the late 19th century. Inhabited by oil, dirt, trains, industry, pain, and ambition.
We need more room.
Well, that was one goddamn hell of a show.
We were happy to have you, Daniel.
You just tell me how to run my family.
Rather than giving the audience music that's easily digestible, he gives you something that is entirely unstable, and that ultimately shakes the film to its core. Hans Zimmer himself was a huge fan of the score, calling it recklessly, crazily beautiful.
I am a sinner. I am a sinner. Say it louder. I am a sinner.
I am a sinner.
Louder, Daniel. I am a sinner.
I am a sinner.
I am so...
Greenwood follows some of the same techniques of exploring the darkness of the world of the film and Paul Thomas Anderson's peculiar drama, The Master. "2017 was a year in particular that brought not one, but two electric scores from Greenwood. One was Phantom Thread. A film of wealth, glamour, Englishness, intrigue, and once again helmed by the brilliant actor Daniel Day-Lewis. Instead of sticking to the technique that drove his work on There Will Be Blood, Greenwood immersed himself in an extremely tonal musical language, inspired by the romantic worlds of Glenn Gould and Nelson Riddle. There's especially some amazing tones of French composer Erik Satie. This time around, Greenwood wrote music that he thought the main character, played by Day-Lewis, would listen to in his everyday life. He did this to highlight the character's commanding presence in the film and the driving theme of hubris and intimacy. With Spencer in 2021, he approached it entirely different. Rather than being infested with that driving sense of romance, it's a score that is almost confused with exactly what it wants to be, putting the audience in a place that is both royal, but also tragic, exhausted, and haunting. The same place where the main character of the film, Diana, finds herself in the story. It's a score that captures the beauty of the wardrobes, the grand feasts, and the dashing etiquette of royal traditions, but that also captures the fear of a girl caught in the fires of a situation, pulling her in different directions, not knowing who to go to, and trying to preserve the ability to emerge from the situation as herself, not what the world or the royal family expects her to be. It's an incredibly beautiful score that goes between so many different emotions, but ultimately shows Greenwood's brilliance as a composer, and the versatility of the different styles in which he's able to write. Instead of the shaking, almost percussive Collegno strings from There Will Be Blood, he instead goes to a world of harpsichords, string ensembles, beautiful and romantic harmony, all pulled together by a beautiful existential dread. In other words, Jonny Greenwood doesn't simply play into different sound worlds, incorporating experimental orchestral techniques, weird rhythmic patterns, unusual experimentation, romance, and dread. He's someone who, in the end, sets out to not simply score the film, but to play a significant role in the film's world, playing the role of the dreadful oil rigs, the dirty and dusty Western landscape, the evil and menacing force that is falling into a hole of instability and chaos, the girl facing a personal crisis of identity, or the dashing fashion designer who lives in a prison of his making. Exploring different perspectives, playing into the subtext, Greenwood's scores are often another character in the film he's working on. The music helps drive things forward while also working to enhance the world of the film, sometimes bold, sometimes scary, sometimes beautiful. Listening to a Jonny Greenwood score is almost like being able to smell the fresh paint or the freshly cut grass. Rather than simply being colorful, his music almost has a texture, an awesome natural grit that provides the film with a sense of realism and immersion. Greenwood is the polar opposite of conventional, in a pretty amazing way. He's someone who embraces the darkness in our humanity, unafraid to show our vulnerabilities. Whether it's Phantom Thread, Spencer, There Will Be Blood, or The Master, each is so different but united by Greenwood's individual voice and magical musical touch. Ultimately, I think Greenwood's music is a great example of being able to open your mind to experimentation and dive into the unknown, exploring textures, perspectives, and ways of looking at the story that are completely different, but are true and authentic.